Hi, everyone. This is Shamitria again with the Over the Kitchen Table, another segment. And we're here with Brother Matt Seawright, who's a Licentiate of the Ninth Episcopal District. And he is perfect because he is the lead minister or over the ministry of the Golden Meals Ministry at Payne Chapel. And so that's perfect today because we will be talking about when there's no daily bread. And so we're going to kind of get into that, and I hope that you all will learn a lot from it and be blessed by our conversation today about food insecurities and hunger and different kinds of things, because our daily bread is really important. We're happy to have you here, Matt. So I'm sorry, Brother Matt. How are you?
Oh, good. I'm good. Glad to be across the kitchen table today.
Yes.
Tune in, seeing a few of them, but good to be at the table.
Great. And see, that's even important because today's, like we're saying, we're talking about having the table to be fed. So being that you are a part of the Golden Meals Ministries, what kind of things do you feel like are important when we're talking about food security, that kind of thing? Just kind of touch a little bit based on that.
Well, the Golden Meals Ministry was birthed in. It's a movement that's taken place over the last year at the vision of our pastor, Reverend LaShawn Cole Slater. And what we found was that when the pandemic came and people began to quarantine and go away into their houses and all, that there were needs that were needed as singers were meeting them on a regular basis, that this would become a load that they might endure during this time. So we found the best way to serve and to be engaged was to provide hot meals. Not necessarily having someone to pull up and grab some boxes of food or produce, but just meeting those needs, like coming to your house and cooking a meal, because we knew that was a lot for people at the time. People either helping out with those efforts and not being able to do so because of the pandemic. So it was a conscious effort. And again, applauding the leadership and the vision of our pastor for seeing that. And then we just got involved. From there, we were able to make connections with food banks, with other things. Other people were able to tell me things that they needed. And since I was out and about, I could just get those for them. So what I see is the need for cooked meals, those who are caregivers. It's not necessarily those with disabilities or just or can't afford it, or in socioeconomic disparities and all. It's literally all kinds of people that need food, that are needing food on a daily basis. It's not people we think about on the regular, but they are there. But yeah, caretakers, singers is giving me an opportunity to see and try to meet other needs of people and to see how we could operate collectively to help meet those needs. But yeah, it's more people need food than we think. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, and that's so crazy because before, as I was prepping for this, I was reading about because we always talked about the hunger, especially with kids, with younger people, but where hunger is in place, or what they call food security, insecurity is across all ages and all groups, different places where you live and different things like that. So it's very interesting. And even how you just touched about caregivers, because if you're taking all this time to help someone else, you're not even thinking about yourself and your own nutrition. So how many times do people make these decisions of whether paying for a bill or having food, or getting some type of medication, which they need food for, but they don't have enough money to pay for food. So it's just so many different scenarios, after putting gas in the car and all these things, what do you have left for food, And that's really, really important, and really important for the ministry and different organizations to provide food for that.
Absolutely. And it's also the fact that we see that in these food deserts and in these food disparities, that everyone cannot access or is even eligible for the resources that are out there in a lot of places.
Yes.
Like you got to be really, really bad off or in a, a very peculiar situation, but
Yeah.
it doesn't consider a lot of the people and many that we serve.
No, you're it's so interesting because even I'm thinking about like post graduating from college. And I know that's like being that you're in from college and you should have the higher SES, but graduating during a recession and different things where you're trying to budget out things, you're like, okay, well, I don't have enough money for food, or if I have $50 and it was just so thankful that at that point, because I've been on food assistance, and it wasn't as as an undergrad, because you can't get that as an undergrad, but where I worked, because I was a AmeriCorps Vista, so because of that we were able to but I really didn't have enough money for food, and I figured out how to, like at that time, that was when my grandparents and my parents were always giving me like these little care packages, but literally like you couldn't afford food. That's probably why I eat so many pastas, because pasta is cheap, like $1 bag for a pasta. But it's very interesting. And I think one point you mentioned is about food deserts. Growing up in a rural area where there's like 1 to 2 grocery stores, I remember there was not even still milk in the city I live sometimes. So, food deserts are real. Can you explain a little bit about food deserts since we're talking about that?
From what I understand, food deserts are spaces that don't have access to, be it a grocery store, be it the people that fresh produce and all. Like it's lack of access, it's lack of resource and lack of access to food. Also systematic as to where they place food and where they place the access for food. So like you mentioned, eating pasta, right? Okay, pasta can fill you up, it's cheap and all, but then it also has an effect where it's causing health concerns, which send you right back to the doctor, where more than likely you got to change your diet. So like not only does it affect like the food you have, but also the health. So more than likely those who don't have access to food also don't have access to medical care and provisions that help to prevent and be aware of what it is they need to be putting in their body. So it becomes a thing for survival. People are literally going without foods, and food disparities don't look like they do. Like they're not always the rural area. There are people at school all the time. One thing I thought about when the pandemic hit was, what about those children who get their meals, throughout the week from school lunch? Either they have free lunch or that's where they eat, because they're going home, they're not eating. Which is something that happened early on in our pastor's vision, was to host a dinner party.
Oh wow!
For those who made the honor roll and all. And for many, that was like another meal, or was an opportunity for them and their families to have a meal. Whether they, we didn't know everyone's situation at all, but it allowed us to minister and get to connect with some people, but find out situations. But here we are, right here, right on the outskirts of Birmingham, and there are food deserts. So they don't look like what we think they look like. And that's what I could share on that.
No, you're exactly right, because I think about which areas have most certain grocery stores, because there are certain grocery stores I don't support because they aren't in certain areas. The more fresher grocery stores, which, like you said, is very systematic. But it's very interesting, even like if you think about Birmingham, where we are, like how there aren't a lot of grocery stores, or they closed the grocery stores, because I think they just closed one of the sites in Inslee that they're very upset about, and where they're putting things. And then on the flip side of that, you see all these fast food restaurants that have all these dollar menus, so which still costs, because sometimes even preparing foods, you think about how you may spend $1 or $2 on rice and beans or whatever that could feed a little bit more versus you can get a $1 sandwich. What has the longest longevity versus these health term effects versus, what's quick and what you can feed right now. And I think that's like what you just talked about, how that touches on just not even for the now, but for the future of how do you eat, you know what I'm saying? And I understand like some of the fast food restaurants have tried to provide more fresh meals, but they cost a lot. You don't ever see a salad for $1. And it's usually not really good salad, but you never see all of the better things, even the chicken, the more real chicken that they have, the higher chicken sandwiches cost a lot more money. So it's very, very, the systematic undertones of, I wouldn't say racism, but the systematic undertones of food is just a very interesting dynamic,
Absolutely. And I wish that was talked about a lot more when it comes to like policy making and what we're doing when it's time to vote and who are the people fighting for us. We put a lot of emphasis on what's taking place in front of us, but not what's taking place or even fighting for those things, such as where we get our foods, is there access to it, how do we expand and do some certain things, getting back into community gardens.
Yes.
That's just something I'm really passionate about, like trying to get some land, trying to get some stuff, like get back to the farming. Like that's what we were doing. And it's funny when I'm talking amongst groups, even just with family, it's funny we talk about, there's not a lot of record and, maybe we could check it out. That's probably a fun research thing, right? But you didn't have a whole lot of record of people, like we had slaves, we had people that were out working, can't see to can't see. And where were all these defects and diseases that we see today? Number one, they weren't sitting down at a desk or something. They were moving, they were working their bodies, and they were eating the scraps. They were eating what they had. They knew the wheat and the corn would flow and the rice would be would spread out for a family, and all these things were but they were working them all, and they were fresh. The food was fresh. You were raising the hog all season and then chopping it up and now we don't know. The bacon tastes great. We don't know where it came from. We don't know what ate it. I grew up spending summers in South Carolina, and whatever we didn't eat was what the pigs ate. So we take it out. Matt take the slop bucket out, to the hogs, and we, do that. It was recycling. It was all that, and we don't see a lot of that anymore. And that was also, we had room to share. Yeah, we had room to share. There was a space, I would say, in this food disparity, issue and all that, we engage community and think about how we as a community can come together and get back to some of the things that we used to do.
Oh, you brought up so many points that I was thinking, like, now you're just talking about community meals, but like eating from the land and eating, strawberries are not meant to be eaten all year. And sometimes that have to be a change of thought process. I mean, maybe the blessing from things like the pandemic, having us to slow down a little bit to understand that certain foods are only meant to be raised during certain times of the year. And that's how people pretty much ate. So when we're eating things like I said, going back to strawberries and certain apples and things, they're only grown at certain times of the year, because that's the reason why the school system is made the way it's made, because it was based off of harvest season. So when we're eating these things and we're forcing companies and farmers to raise things when it's not properly time to be raised things. And so we're ingesting a little bit more chemicals because we are impatient in a way. And it's kind of, when we're even talking and wasteful, because then sometimes we're like, well, these strawberries that we're having in January, which are not meant to be raised in January, don't taste as sweet as the July. So then we're throwing those things away, and which even creates even more like not having foods, not having being wasteful, and there's like, again, so many people who are without food. And it's just all of these compounding issues that I think as a system as a whole, we may have to just kind of rethink things a little bit. And being, like you said, having this communal meals, because I think, you know, you have potatoes, you have the cow, like, let's make this steak and potato dinner. I mean, that's how some of the meals I started in undergrad happened, because I said, hey, neighbor, I don't have this, and you have this, and we kind of got together and made our own meal. So I think that's such a beautiful, you know, what you just touched on is so beautiful. And then you know that Susie May down the street doesn't have anything. So whatever leftovers you could provide to them, you know, for their meal, or even share them in meal. And I just think that would make humanity a little bit better.
Yes, and that's the other goal is shifting in, not just how we eat, but how we do fellowship, and how we communicate, and how we grow, and how we are, you know, showing our humanity, showing our fellowship, showing how we thrive, and we need each other. You know, one of the most punishing things or whatever for the criminal justice system is isolation, solitary confinement, because they know that isolation is detrimental to the mind, to the body, to the spirit, can break you down. So as we, you know, think about coming together and all, and thinking about, like, you raised a good point about the food we eat throughout the year. It's something I think about. But I also go back a little further, because you have people that eat their blood type. They eat by their blood type. People that eat by, you know, certain times of years. But I even go back as far as, you know, if we are to trace where we're from, if we look back and see that, you know, hey, maybe the high percentage of our ancestry is in this part of this country where these things grow, where these things are frequent and all. Like, so you might not even be eating the exotic fruits and stuff that's in season in that season.
Yeah.
So it's all types of, you know, ways to go back and forth and think about, you know, how we're eating, and just being conscious of what we're taking in, as well as being conscious what others are not. You know, as we talk about food disparities, like, we might be getting better, but does someone else have the access or even the information to know what types of foods to consume or not consume?
You're right. And I think that's the beauty of having these spaces, you know, and, you know, new generations, like our generation and younger, that are having these conversations where we kind of want to get back to what I would say old school, the slower pre-industrial times, you know, getting back to, like you just said, having these community gardens. There's so many people in our age group that are interested in growing things, and, you know, maybe not having a cow or chickens, but, you know, we're interested in having these fresh fruits and vegetables and, you know, herbs and different things, and wanting things to taste so fresh and so pure, because you just don't know. Like, again, like, I was just out of the country and tasting pure cane sugar. That was so amazing, because that made me think a lot about my childhood of chewing on sugar. But it was like, this food is not as sweet as American food. Like, and having to change your mind shift of, like, our food is really sweet, or like, we don't have to ingest as much as we're used to, the salts and the sweetness, because that's not how food naturally grows or food naturally tastes. Like, I know there are some kids that I've seen who don't have food, but sometimes they're kind of picky, which is kind of interesting either. But anyway, having this whole mind shift of changing what we think and how food tastes, and enjoying food on top of that, like making things slow. Maybe fast food thing wasn't the right way to do, but just having time to enjoy and tasting and using all of your five senses to have a meal experience, you know?
Most definitely. That's good. You talking about a recalibration of your tasting, and even expanding your palate.
Yeah.
I don't know about, you know, we are getting into farming. I want chickens and goats and cows, you know. So
I'll come and I'll trade you when I create my
yeah, I want all of that. But at the same time, you sharing made me think about, like, my time in Haiti. and going there and just seeing like, you know, I came back looking for mangoes that taste like the ones I had in Haiti because they were just so fresh. But I also remember seeing this turkey on the grounds and just like, oh, dang, okay, y'all got turkeys here. They said, that's not a turkey. They said, where you see a turkey? I was like, yeah, right over there. They said, that's a chicken. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, so just how we're, you know, they're not pumping them up and trying to get the quickest sale, like they're nurturing their livestock and all. So yeah, it's something we should definitely get into, and something we really need to look at how we recalibrate. Because even if we can afford to get, like you said, McDonald's or that dollar meal and everything, it's also not feeding us physically as we need to. And like you said, not consuming so much. So that if you have a filling meal, then it'll last you a lot longer. I did a lot of juicing early in the pandemic, and just think about how it changes my appetite, my thought process, the way I was looking for food. And something I've been doing as of recently is a 36-hour water fast. So from you know, that also makes me think about, like, when I thought about food, I wasn't hungry. I just wanted to eat. It's like I was fine. I could drink some more water and I was good, but like I wanted to eat. So and even still, it wasn't food that I should have been eating.
Yeah.
Right. It was, oh, I smell this chicken. I just passed this spot. I know they got the lemon pepper on them. I want that, you know, but I don't need that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a recalibration. I'm glad you highlighted that.
I'm interested to see if once we recalibrate, I know that would take maybe a few generations to get to recalibration, but how much would that close the gap a little bit of food insecurity, you know? Because food, maybe certain foods won't be such as in high demand, you know, because I mean, I feel like during those times, you know, reading things from history, like in the 30s and 20s, people did have food issues, you know, of course, but was it as great as these people, as the kids that don't have food, or the seniors that don't have food, and all these locations where there's not food available? Do you feel like it was as great as it is now, you know, because, you know, with the classisms and the money wealth gap is that made it so great that you know, you're having to make these real life decisions about putting gas in your car.
Right. But as I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm thinking about the stories from those that I know like lived through it as well, and all, like it was community. You know, there's people that just didn't know, maybe didn't even know how bad it was, because community was there to make up, you know, to take up on it, where people left off, or to help close the gap, or, you know, show up in different spaces when they needed to. And you had community, like it just gets back to community. You know, and maybe that's what we got to do is make it unrecognizable. Like maybe, you know, not even knowing that, oh, this person's going, I didn't even know we were hungry. I didn't know we were poor. I didn't know we were struggling like we were, because we always had so-and-so. We always knew we could go to so-and-so. So-and-so was always there to make sure that these things happen. We didn't even know until I got older. I found out what was really going on. You know, so I think where we have progressed, we've really missed out on a lot of those opportunities to be communal. As we're going into these spaces and all, and keeping to ourselves, you know, like we're missing out on some of those values. We saw in the pandemic, kids playing outside again. Like, oh my gosh, really? Okay, you know, because everyone's running and doing something and staying busy and all. We're missing out on community. I think that's the answer: community.
You that just makes me think about it when you're bridging those gaps through doing the Golden Meals ministry, because there's the church community providing foods to the community. So going back to these kinds of things, and not, you know, it's good that we do have like the nonprofits like Feeding America and all the different things, or even I even say in even a community aspect, some of these schools provide meals for the kids during the students during the summertime, which which makes it unrecognizable. So having these other institutions where maybe they don't have to necessarily go to a food bank, because that's kind of putting that person or why it's good to have SNAP and WIC and all those kind of things, is making that person, especially if somebody is very prideful, having to go seek the resource versus just the resource being available. Hey, just on a baseline kind of thing. Here's free meal without making you feel singled out, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. And that's, we see that in a lot of people not even going to apply for some of the benefits. Mm-hmm. Right. And I tell people all the time, it's your tax money. Go apply. Eligible or not, go apply. Go get what you can, or, and if you can, then share it. Find ways to share it, find ways to multiply on what you've been given and to give it back and build that community.
Yep, and I think that's probably the reason why they even changed how, the EBT cards look like. They look like a regular credit card, so it doesn't look different than anything else. So people don't have to feel ashamed. I think it's kind of been popularized a little bit more versus probably when it first came out.
Probably because of the card.
Yeah.
We've modernized the experience where, that's what's going on. We think back to Crooklyn, scene in Crooklyn where she gets sent to the stores. I don't want it, man. I don't want them thinking, we on food stamps. Girl, go get that stuff from the store. Come back, so yeah, I think it's shifted in a lot of ways because it is my, I got a card.
Yeah.
And put it in. So yeah, you're right about that.
Back to this community. And I think that's where it starts and begins. And that wouldn't change a generation. That wouldn't be a generational shift. Like, it wouldn't take generations to see that change. That's something just, again, as a community of believers, us just doing, and it doesn't have to be like a big serve day or anything like that. And it could just be silently done. Hey, we have like you all are doing, what we're doing, having these meals available for people, prepared hot, fresh meals, just in a way that it doesn't feel so broadcasted, but also providing community. And I think that's kind of what I think has, when we in America, as we've seen, like from 9/11, now the pandemic, and every little event that we've had, is always bringing this sense of togetherness that we have lost over probably the last 30, 40 years. And what we've seen lost in our generation is the sense of community has been lost until we have these grand events that bring us together temporarily, usually a year or two, and then we're like, oh, okay, back to our normal stuff.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about the need to get back to our agricultural foundations, as well as organizational support, and being intentional about what it is that we're doing and how we're doing it, as well as how it affects things in policy for food. And yes, we need to make sure the right people are elected, but we need to make sure that the right things are happening as well. And I'm a strong believer that those are things that we can be doing all the time, anytime, no matter who is in office or what they're doing. And we should be intentional about trying to solve some of those issues.
And you made me think of one thing when you were talking about going back to the agriculturals and community. So if you do decide to want to get back to that agricultural thing, you don't have to take on the goats, the cows, or a whole full garden. You can just start off with one plant. Right now, I'm just trying to start with keeping one plant alive. And then, then you go find Brother Matt, or you go find Reverend Slater, who's going to make this, and then you can all put all of your resources, because Brother Matt is going to have the cows and the goats and everything else. So
yes.
And then, I don't mind growing herbs, because that doesn't take that long to grow and it's easily maintained. And so if you say, you have a cousin over here has a little bit more land and they're a little bit better and have more time to do that. If everybody takes on a piece of the food, then you're seeing how things are grown. And it's something beautiful about watching things grow. That whole experience, you're knowing where the food comes from, you're knowing what's being put into it. And it's a little bit cheaper because seeds are less than $1. And probably like all the other things for maybe about $10-20. But anyway, Home Depot or Lowe's or Walmart can help you with those kinds of things. But if each person takes on a sector of food, then you all can use your harvest. Back in the day, not back in the day, I know particularly from where I'm from, the AME church has always had this harvest home meeting. And that would be traditionally many years ago, that was the time when all of the churches brought their harvest in as an AME church and gathered together and had the celebration before. Usually it was like before conference. And that's when they would bring all of their food together to share with each other. So if we move back to these kinds of the tradition of why we have these certain names or certain events, and
talking. I said, you talking, go ahead.
Yeah, working together. And even going down back to Thanksgiving. I mean, I'm not talking about the whole other theories about Thanksgiving, because I know it's a lot of other things about it, but even how that started with the Pilgrims and the Native Americans bringing together what each other have. And I think that's what it is, and getting back to the family table. And I know it's hard for people who don't have meals, but I think even in those spaces, when there's an opportunity for a meal to be shared, that it's always together, whether that's you and that person, you and one person, yourself, or whatever, or many people, is to having a community, a sense of community.
Amen. I agree. Well, God bless you. Thank you for not only sharing that.
Oh, most definitely. Thank you for wanting to be a guest on today's Over the Kitchen Table. And I thank you for your ministry. Thank you for the forethought and how you're blessing people in this way. It's a total different thing that, in ministry, some people don't think about ministry, beyond the walls of just preaching and scripture, but just reaching out to, feeding the 5,000 and making a little bit go a long way. And that's, that's really what it's about. Like, Jesus had a little bit, but was able to multiply. And then those people multiply. Think about how much that person who may have had some food insecurity, one of those children or one of those wives or one of the men who would say, oh, I was so blessed by Jesus today. And then they decided to go feed a whole nother 5,000. Like, think about how that expands. And that's still about community.
That's where I was going. I was like, community.
Yeah.
It's all community.
Yeah.
Getting back to how the community, and it'll never be what it was, right? But it can be what it is. It can be what it is. We are communing people. We are fellowshipping, and we're built to connect and to be fruitful and multiply, right? Like to be fruitful in our ways and our walk and how we do what we do, and to multiply that and bring an abundance to the community. It's all community. We can solve so many issues by being more communal.
I agree. And on that note, we will end today. Again, thank you, Brother Matt, for joining us today. And I hope everyone is blessed. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bless you. Bless you.